Big case this week. And no exception, we're about 6 episodes away from the finale, and things are getting really good with our episode, Inside Guy. And before this video begins, I just want to get this out of the way, since this is the week of Christmas. Let's get the holiday greetings out of the way. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever holiday you celebrate, happy holidays and whatnot. Or if you have a problem with that, then, well, to kind of quote Cinemassacre, and since the fact that my videos are rated TVMA, then happy shut the fuck up. So, yeah, let's take a look at today's episode, Inside Guy. So, in the events proceeding onwards from last week's episode, where O'Malley is basically electrocuted to death and the news finds out about it, Mickey and Sandy roll into O'Malley's little home and digs through to find some certain evidence. Well, in one of the drawers, they find a journal. A journal detailing all of what happens in our event this week, or at least all the heists that happen. The heist of, as the episode calls it, the heist of 1977. And it contains a journal with other known members of this syndicate. And, oh boy, all this heist stuff, it seems to be a lot of Mickey's business. There's a heist going on here, let's try and take advantage of it. Again, I lost track of the many counts in the past seasons that Mickey's basically gone, like, full-on gung-ho about pulling off a heist and everything. Might have been like the entirety of the show he's done that. Almost. I think. I'm unsure. But let's continue onwards. So Ray takes Molly to his apartment, but winds up finding out that Bridget is in his bed and asking for advice on Smitty's actions and what to do about what he's done to Adam. To which Ray basically says, well, you take care of it. It is kind of sort of your situation. Smitty's your problem, so is Adam. But then Ray sees Bunchy in his apartment walking, asking for some advice, and talks about this kid, the kid that he shot, and how he sort of helped rob a bunch of the drugstores for money to help him out. And Ray sort of kind of is just like, you crazy? In the middle of public? Got fired from your own fucking job and all that? But then comes up with the idea, how about just have Bunchy work for Ray? He's open to people. So, kinda what he does. He takes Ray's advice and joins his little cavalcade of investigation. And so, of course, Ray's apartment's not fit, so Ray takes Molly back home, only to find Jim, was it Jim? Or what was it? I keep forgetting these names, but I think it was Jim for this one. Takes Molly back to the apartment, but Jim basically is just sitting there and tells Ray about, the heist of 77, and unknowing and unsure that Mickey may or may not still be alive. And he just goes into details, talking about how all of it happened, all of the members, about the O'Malley that was inside the retirement home being electrocuted and died. And then, basically, Ray leaves the apartment to try and ask the question if he's still alive. Even getting to the point where Ray tries to contact Lena, but Lena basically refers to another detective, another investigator to help out with the scenario. I'm going to have to look through the name in here, but I'll mention her name later on. So Mickey and Daryl and Sandy arrive at the home where our character... It was in here. I had an asterisk to help me out with this. So basically, the three of them stop at the home of Ronnie, where there is a safe inside. So Daryl goes in and tries to sneak in and see if this Ronnie character is inside. And it just ends there. We don't see any action. Instead, it cuts to the next morning where Ray goes to his partial facility and sees Bunchy dressed up in formal attire and practically ready to work for Raymond. And duty calls as the new investigator, Patty, there we go, that's her name, is that Lena refers to Patty to a new situation, a new ordeal that is going on with the idea of, is Mickey still alive or not, in this whole, like, O'Malley robbery ordeal. So Bunchy basically joins Ray along to take a look at this whole situation at hand. And while they're driving up, Ray winds up, or at least Bunchy, as he hops along with Ray, asks him about being a part of the payroll to help out with the kid. And Ray accepts him, and he's officially on board with being a Donovan investigator. And that's kind of where we stop for now. Nearly right on both these sides. So what happens next? Here we go. So Ray heads to the home that Mickey was at, finding the door unlocked. And this is where the whole situation that Mickey and Daryl and Sandy happened last night. This is where we don't see what actually happened that night, and Daryl going in and whatnot. In that, Ray takes a look and finds our dead man, Ronnie, and our other character, or at least a safe that's near him, busted open. Now that safe is what Mickey's been looking for. The one that contains all the tapes and everything that could try and help them get revenge for that heist and everything. So it ought to be interesting to see what happens there. Then basically Ray winds up getting a call, calls up Jim and basically tells him what happened, and then Ray hangs up, and then Jim winds up calling, again, I'm going to have to refer to him as Ears, because that's like the one thing that sort of stands out with him, is his ear. So Ears is just hanging out at the bar and painting in his a model of a dragon, I assume that he's a partial fan of Dungeons and Dragons. Don't know. But calls him up and tries to convince him to be a part of this whole thing. In turn, Ears wants to be a part of the company, to which, of course, Jim refuses. Because he still stands firm by who he picked to be the head of the company. So afterwards, Smitty goes to Terry's apartment asking for the advice, but as he's trying to get something, his phone rings and he answers. Where Mickey says that Mick is still alive and winds up asking Smitty and Sandy to, Smitty and Terry to go check out Sandy's home. Sandy is just an entertaining character. I mean, there are people up on Instagram and Twitter, and yes, I sometimes use Instagram. Don't mellow my yellow for it. That should be on a quote of a t-shirt. Anyways, I've been seeing Instagram and Twitter posts that feature Sandy and her very intriguing quotes, but truthfully, she has some of the best lines in the entirety of this season. I don't remember last season, but definitely fans are just being like, Sandy is the new best Ray Donovan character in the whole show. Like, who's this character? Aunt Sandy is the greatest character in this season so far. And truthfully, when they headed to New York, I can definitely see people saying Aunt Sandy's the best character. So, charming that she's getting a lot of very positive feedback on it. So, we focus on Mickey as he takes a listen to those tapes that was mentioned in last week's episode, where he takes a listen for some clues and some evidence that can lead to them finding a way to get revenge and get rich quickly. During all that, Ray winds up trying to constantly call Daryl, and to which Aunt Sandy just basically hangs them up and talks about how there's no longer phone booths and everything, and how, like, cellular phones are practically eating people, which is, again, she has the best quotes. Who doesn't like this character, honestly? But yeah, Daryl bitches about this whole ordeal, how he's not supposed to be with them and everything, but then, Mickey, he winds up in a cooing, convincing way to have Daryl still proceed on with what they had in mind. A little way of convincing him to say, this is the real deal. Whatever Ray is telling you, don't believe it. Trust me, I'm the friend you need. I started thinking back of the MOP movie for a brief second. That song that Capper had, The Friend You Need. Catchy song. Now to go to the other half of this journal here. Not the actual journal in the show, but the notes I keep from the episodes themselves. Onwards, Terry and Smitty wind up inspecting Sandy's home and finding not much there. The cars aren't there, but Terry takes a listen to the voicemail and finds out that Aunt Sandy left the credit card somewhere. And of course, they forward the memo to Ray just as he leaves the apartment that Daryl lives in, which, finding absolutely nothing there, and leaves, and partially the roommate, the character, let's see if I can find her here. I think the character's name was Claudette, I think. Yeah, Claudette. Essentially, Claudette goes in and tries to film Ray as if he was a police officer. Probably could be because of the way that he kicked the door open, that he was perceived as a cop. So, proceeding onwards, Bridge meets Adam to tell another side of the story and drop the charges on him, and Adam hears the story out, saying that that the story was an instrument-related incident, that he broke his hand. And truthfully, it works. And basically Adam agrees to tell the story on how Bridget tells it. To, drop the charges. As Ray hightails himself to where the card was left, it turns out that Detective Perry is following Ray, as Ray has to call Terry and Smitty to do a car swap to try and swerve her off of the scene. For the most part, works, as Ray escapes and Terry and Daryl wind up riding in Ray's car. So, at least Ray got away with it, I guess, for now. So, they drive off. Smitty receives a call from Bridget, telling Smitty, at least Bridget calls Smitty, telling her about all the new things, that he's off the hook. And again, Smitty is still miffed about the whole cheating thing and tells her off. And just immediately hangs up on her. Again, a fight-or-flight instinct. I think that's what it's called. But, again, it's what I mentioned last week. Inner moods can overthink of, remorse. So, your mind can fully think a very angered tone. You were looking forward to something, but it turns out that wasn't going to happen. That instinct kicks in without thinking of the consequences until they happen and come crashing right through your face. I don't need to go into that last week. So yeah. After hanging up, Perry pulls them over as Smitty is arrested and taken in with Perry, leaving Terry to drive the car, which I can only imagine how far that will turn out for him. Hoping that in next week's episode he doesn't get into a crash. So, with Ray's story, Ray arrives at the bar that the credit card's left at, the Dusty Bottom, which turns out to be in a sort of LGTB place. A lot of gay people hang around at. I don't know what to say about it, because you know how partially PC the internet is. But whatever, he arrives at the Dusty Bottom to retrieve the credit card. as Ray basically decides to kill time and see if Mickey will come. Where Ray... What, my almost said? Ray... So, basically, Ray grabs a drink and waits for Mickey. Or some sort of lead, like Daryl or Sandy, whatever to happen. So, to cut in on this, Bunchy tries to visit the kid and the mother and whatnot, and is confused on why they aren't there. He winds up asking a nurse, whom goes off to try and retrieve some information. However, the cop that we saw from the episode where Bunchy winds up receiving the contract, and initially I thought he was going to join GoldenEye. Yeah, it turns out that the cop just approached him and said, "That kid you shot? He died." To which Bunchy leaves, again in despair. That whole emotion situation. So much guilt could happen over him that it can be very troubling, let's just say. I do not know what's going to happen with Bunchy, because Bunchy essentially this season, well, this and last season, he's just been through hell. Not only with their baby daughter, how the fact is how he can't ever see her again. And this kind of gets him into despair to the point where he kidnaps her all the way to New York, and his former wife has to come and retrieve her. And this season, with the kid, I don't know which one is more effective. This or the baby girl. It takes like a big, big, big toll on his life. And again, whatever emotions happen can cloud the mind. Back to the story, which falls into Smitty being taken away by Detective Perry. So, Perry tries to question the whole concert ordeal to try and throw them off. And Detective Perry winds up asking her the next lyrics, to which he says that he can't remember the lyrics, and he's not like much of a lyrics person. However, she tells the rest of it, and tells him how Smitty is stuck in this whole Donovan situation, asking what happened, why did Mickey shoot 3 people when he's potentially unable to do so, and all the bodies buried at sea, and all that. And Detective Perry, all that happens is this gives her one simple thing. He could go to jail for 3 consecutive life sentences. Those consecutive life sentences basically means if you kill an authority or kill a certain amount of people, I think that's how it goes. A certain amount of people, if you kill them, can lead to multiple life sentences. Any people that were part of this crime, those charges go on to them. Now up to the final act of this whole story. Again, I'd like to see what happens with Smitty next week. Smitty, so far, has a modestly good story going for him. And ought to be interesting to see how all of it plays out. But not as much as this. As Ray is sitting in the bar and having his drinks, he overhears Mickey's voice, and Ray gets up and follows Mickey to try and figure out where are they hiding? To which, as he gets to a certain area, Daryl winds up punching him from getting to Mickey, and then both of them get into a fight. Ray calls Daryl a monkey. Yeah, I know that's racist. And I will agree that Ray is actually being racist here, so no comment on that. Basically, both of them get into a fight. Ray tries to restrain him, get him cold. Daryl tells Ray to piss off, and as Ray gets out to try and go away, basically, Ray is essentially smacked on the head with a glass bottle. I don't have a glass bottle with me, so imagine this as it is. It basically knocks him in the head, and he goes tumbling down. And that's where our episode ends. Inside Guy. That was an episode. Again, I'm not sure where to feel about this or where it's going, but I can only imagine what'd be the next story. I could imagine Smitty now having to work with Detective Perry to try and get Ray and the other Donovan crew arrested. And then the whole thing with Ray having to find Mickey and Daryl and Sandy, try and figure out where they're going at with their heist, and there's just so much to perceive in this episode. And with it being Christmas time, ought to be interesting to see what kind of events that we get transpiring these said scenarios. So yeah, it was a good episode. Definitely will rewatch it if I'm planning on marathoning the show again. But before you go, I have sort of one little odd piece of criticism. So while I was waiting for the new episode of Ray Donovan, I decided to partially take a look and see if there's a new episode next week. However, when I went to check, for whatever reason, this week's episode was up hours ahead of the East and West Coast airings. I do not understand why. I'm not sure this is in any other services. I mean, I have Xfinity as my provider. I mean, already they're just a nightmare to deal with, but what else can I get? There's too much on TV that I can't miss. Well, back to the story. For whatever reason, the on-demand service for Showtime, they've got this episode up hours before it even hits the airwaves. I don't know whether or not this is like some sort of new move for their cord-cutting thing and Showtime Anytime. I don't know what's going on here, why they do this. I mean, partially I've been thinking that this could be like a very limelighted chance that I could get my episode review out ahead, that I could get the episode review out ahead of time, you know? But I'm unsure about that. Because people, like, if they check at like 5 of the East Coast people that watch the episode, they'd be like, hey, he got his review out seconds after it aired. What happened? I don't know why they're doing this. I seriously don't. Just need to get that vented out of the way, but that probably still isn't going to stop me from reviewing these Ray Donovan episodes. I'm probably still going to watch them in the times that they air either way. But yeah, there's not much I can really say about this whole ordeal, except, why are they doing this? Well, anyways, like I said, happy holidays, and I'll see you guys next week for the final episode, at least for the year. We have episode 7, so let me just mark that right now. And yeah, I'll see you guys for next week, which ought to be fun, because New Year's and everything, the turn of the decade, and ought to be intriguing to see where the story goes from here.